In this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this adorable cowgirl themed cake. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. Who got the amazing reference? It's from a show called Happy Endings, and it was hysterical, but it was only on for 3 seasons, and I love it so much. But anyway, if you want to skip the intro and get right into the video, there are chapters linked below. I am making a cowgirl themed cake this week, and I want to show you how I decorate it. Just a note, I am starting with my cakes already baked, filled, iced in American buttercream, and they are all in my refrigerator. That way the icing is solid and I'm not going to mess up my cakes when I work on them. I refrigerate all of my cakes, and I do have videos showing you how I bake, fill, ice, make icing, refrigerate cakes. Everything is going to be linked in the description below, as well as all of the tools that I use in this video. So if you see me use like a ruler or some straws or whatever, everything is going to be linked below. And I will also let you know how much I charged for this cake. So let's get into the video.
First, I want to stack the cake. I just got this out of the refrigerator. The icing is solid. I'm not going to mess it up. I have my little ruler here. This will be linked in the description. And I measure my straws. I cut my straws and stick them in the bottom tier. Then I put a little bit of buttercream down. And my hands are clean when I handle these cakes. I'm going to stack the next cake on top, make sure it's level. I have a full stacking tutorial and I will link that in the description. Now I just marked the front of the cake so I don't forget, and I'm going to make the topper. This fondant has Tylose powder mixed into it, and I use this Wilton pink to get this light pink color. Everything that I use will be linked in the description. And I want to make the ruffles, so I'm rolling it out into a log, sprinkle down some cornstarch, flatten that log, and I want to roll it tall before I roll it long, and just roll it out really thin. I have this ribbon cutter, and you can adjust it to make the ribbons however wide that you would like. And I'm just cutting a bunch of ribbons and remove the excess pieces, and you can see how thin this fondant is. And now I want to make the ruffles, so I have this ball tool and a foam pad, and I'm just putting the ball tool halfway on the fondant, halfway on the pad, and really thinning the edges out. And I'm going to do that for all of the strips. Now I have some piping gel, and I'm going to get a little piping gel just around the very top of the cake. This cake is just out of the refrigerator. The icing is solid. I'm not going to mess it up. Now I'm putting the ribbon around the cake, and I'm kind of bunching it. I'm pinching it together just to give it more of a bunched look. I have a tutorial explaining in detail how I do this type of ruffle on a cake, and I will link that in the description. Where it meets in the back, just cut the excess, and pressing the fondant down against the cake at the very bottom. So now I can get a little bit more piping gel around that bottom part. And I don't want the piping gel to go too high. And now I'm going to cover that bottom part with another ruffle strip. So again, so you see how I'm pinching it together and then pushing it against the cake. And that one wasn't long enough, so I needed a little extra piece for that. And perfect. You won't even be able to tell. And see, again, I'm pressing the ribbon where it's at the very bottom to make sure that it's flat, and do that process the entire way down the cake till I get to the very bottom. And now, I don't like how it looks when it is just one strip like that at the bottom. I feel like it looks weird. So what I like to do, go back to my ribbons and cut that bottom part off, and then go back to my cake and get some piping gel down and use that shorter height strip just to make a final little ribbon at the bottom. And I just think it looks better doing it that way. You don't have to, but I just think it looks better. And then I'm going to use a palette knife to press it in kind of on an angle at the bottom, just so it looks a little neater where it meets the cake. And that looks good. Let's stick that back in the refrigerator. Now I want to make the topper, and I use these 2 pinks. They will be linked in the description, and you can't just roll it out because the back is going to be so ugly. So this is what I do. This is going to be a topper. So you want to roll it into a log, stretch it so you have a smooth part on the top and the bottom, and get some cornstarch down. And I want to roll this out pretty thick, so it's going to be like a 1/2 inch thick, and set that aside. Now I have a cutting board with a piece of non-skid pad underneath, an X-Acto knife with a wet paper towel, a Dresden tool, and a needle tool, and a little bit of water. All the stuff I always have when I do this, and all of my fondant has some of this Tyler's powder mixed in. I measured my cake. I made sure I printed out that 8 and the hat and everything the size that I wanted it to be. I have really thin white fondant, and I'm just going to do my trace, cut, and smooth method here. So I'm taking my Dresden tool and I'm lightly outlining it so I can transfer those lines onto the fondant, peel it back, and whenever you have letters or numbers, you always want to cut the center pieces first. It just makes it so much easier, because once you cut the entire thing out, it's more difficult to cut those center pieces. After I cut anything out, I am going to take the time to use my tools and my fingers to smooth all of my cuts. You may not see me do it all the time, but every single time, look, I am smoothing my cuts. It just makes everything look so much neater. And now I'm going to do the same thing on a piece of thin black fondant. Because I want to make these cow prints and I need to know how big to make them. So I peel that back. I'm going to cut the center pieces out. And now I'm just deepening that outline so I can see the line. And I want to cut little cow print pieces. So I'm starting, you see I'm just kind of waving back and forth and smooth my cuts. And then I'm going to put that on the white piece and it's going to fit there perfectly. So if I just cut random pieces, I wouldn't know if they would fit in here. And I'm just doing that for all of those little cow pieces. I set them down and then I can get a little bit of water behind them and stick it down to the white piece, right? So I set them up in place first, and then I get some water and stick it down. Now I have that thicker piece of hot pink fondant, get a little bit of water on the back of that white fondant and gently lay it down. Anytime I cut anything out of thicker fondant, I'd make a shallow cut first so that blade isn't going all the way down to the board. I'm just creating a line. Once I have that line created, now I stick the blade all the way down to the board and use that line as a guide to cut it out. That way it doesn't mess up the fondant. Now I'm using my tools, using my fingers. I flip it over, smooth my cuts from the back, and then flip it to the front and do the same thing. Now I'm going to put skewers in here and I'm twisting it in. I'm not jabbing it in. If you jab it in, you're going to distort the piece. Flip it over, make sure that it is not popping out the front or the back, and let's set that aside. Now I have a thinner piece of yellow fondant, and let's do the same thing for the horseshoe. So I'm tracing the outline and making sure that I have all the inner details traced as well. Peel that back, and now I want to deepen these lines, so I'm using my Dresden tool. And now I'm using a ball tool because I want to make those lines where, or those places where those holes are, I want to deepen them a little bit. So I'm just pressing down, flattening the fondant, and using the tip of the ball tool just to make those impressions. I will link all the ball tools below as well. And again, since this is thicker fondant, I'm going to make a shallow cut first to create the line, and then use that line as a guide, stick the knife all the way down to the board to cut this out. And then let's flip it over, smooth it from the back, and smooth it from the front. Realign that on the picture, and let's set that aside. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the hat, tracing the outline, cutting it out, smoothing my cuts. You guys know the process. And let's set that aside. Now I printed out this little paisley print on my edible printer. I measured out the lettering, how big I want it to be, and I'm sticking the paper on top using a sharp X-Acto knife, and I am cutting the letters out of that edible image. I have videos showing you how I use an edible printer, and I will link that below. So you see how the letter, I'm able to cut the letters out. Now, curved letters kind of suck when you do this. So the S, the O, they kind of stink because they don't have straight lines. So you have to be real precise as you're cutting this out. And it was a little jagged, so I'm just trying to refine that. And look how much easier it is with an N. It's all just straight lines, so much easier. Good. Now I have some gold fondant and I'm just sticking the letter on because I want to paint this gold. So I'm making sure that I don't move the letter when I'm doing it just because I want to get the fondant cut out. And I'm going to do that for all the letters. So I'm just placing the edible image on top. I'm not gluing it down yet. And then cut all the letters out. Now I have this roll come super gold and some lemon extract. Pour that in a cup, mix it together, and now put those on a paper towel and I can paint all of these gold. Now when I do this is thicker fondant. I want to make sure that I paint the edges, the sides of it as well, because you're going to be able to see that. Once it dries, go back over it again with a second coat. And I'm going to do the same thing for the horseshoe, starting from the back, making sure I get the edges. Flip it over and paint the front. And then do a second coat once it dries. Now I'm getting a little piping gel on the back of the edible image lettering and stick that on those gold letters that I cut out before. Good, and let's set that aside. Now I have this clay gun, a little bit of shortening on my finger, and I'm just kind of lubing the inside of that. I have this rope disc, and I am rolling out some fondant, fill that little cavity there, screw that on, and then squeeze out some of the fondant. And I'm going to twist it to make it look like a rope. And I'm going to do this many, many times because I'm going to cover the entire top tier with it. And after I take it out of the gun, you see how I twist it to make it look like a rope. Set that aside. Now I took the tape off of that top tier so I can easily lift it off of the cake board. Mark the back of the cake and use some piping gel around the entire side of the cake. I'm wiping the board so the fondant doesn't stick to the cake. Start in the very back where I made that little mark. Wrap it around where it meets in the back, get a little piping gel and press it together. And then I'm going to stack all of these on top of each other. So get another one, wrap it the entire way around where it meets in the back, push it together. Now I kept putting this back in the fridge so the icing is hard and I'm not going to mess this up. So I just took it out of the fridge and now I'm doing this top one. If the icing was soft, I could mess it up as I did that. So now that looks pretty good, pressing all the fondant on and put that back in the fridge. Now I want to airbrush it, so I took it back out of the fridge. I have some brown airbrush coloring. I love this airbrush machine. I will find it and link it below. And I'm just going to turn the dial back a little bit, fill the cup with some of the brown food coloring. And I always have a paper towel handy and I would do a light spray. Don't spray too hard. I'm holding it back away from the cake and I'm just kind of going in like a circular motion. And I don't want to airbrush the entire thing. I just want to give it a little dimension so it doesn't look as flat. So when I get to the top, I'm blocking the buttercream with that paper towel so I don't get airbrush on the icing, and then set that aside. Now I get the rest of the cake out of the fridge and now I want to stack the top tier. So I'm finishing doing the same process as before, getting the straws in, some buttercream down, and now look, I can easily lift that off that cardboard since I removed that piece of tape. Make sure it's level, dowel the cake, and again, my stacking tutorial is linked in the description, which will tell you this entire process, how to do it. Now I just want to wipe the cake board, make sure the board is clean, get a little bit of piping gel around the bottom. And you didn't see, but I did airbrush these extra pieces of rope as well. And I'm just wrapping them around the board and where they meet, cut it and push it together. Now when I put the name on, I'm getting a little bit of icing on the back. Start with the center letter and then I build out to the left and build out to the right. So the name is going to be center on the cake. Once I have all the letters on, I'm just adjusting them into the correct position. And now I'm trying to make like a little loop here, like a little bow with this extra piece of rope fondant. And cut a little piece and wrap it around the center, and there's a little rope bow. Then I'm going to put that down on the bottom part and then get a little bit of piping gel behind it to stick it to the cake. Now I want to make a little cow print, so I'm going to put that on the bottom. So again, cow print is super simple. I just cut little wavy circles and smooth my cuts. And then when I put it on the cake, I cut a straight edge, so where it meets the top and the bottom, it's straight. And then I have some pieces that are full, you know, so I'm just trying to find where these pieces fit the best. And that looks good. Let's set that aside. Now I want to airbrush this horseshoe. I just feel like it looked too gold, so I have some more of that brown airbrush coloring, and I'm just deepening the details, just making it look a little bit better. And make sure you clean out your airbrush. Now I want to make a daisy, so I have this cutter and I'm getting a little bit of shortening on it. Cut a piece of fondant out, press it against the bottom, and then use a small rolling pin just to press the fondant in. Good. Press it down to create an impression and then peel it away. And there we go, there's a little flower. So I cut another one out, getting some water down on the bottom one and then putting the top one down, and I want to stagger the petals. I don't want the petals just sitting right on top of each other. And I have this little, this mold for centers of flowers. I got this years ago. I don't even know if I could find it. I can try to find it. And then I have this other cutter, so I'm cutting a smaller daisy, pushing it out with my Dresden tool, smoothing those jagged edges, and then taking scissors and I'm going to cut each petal in half. Then I get a little bit of water on it and stick the center of the flower on it and just make sure all those petals aren't sticking together, and then stick that right in the center. Set that aside for it to dry. Now, I made this hat. I didn't like the other hat. It didn't fit right, and I totally forgot to record it. I did the same thing. I rolled out the fondant. I traced it. I deepened the lines, right? Added that little ribbon on there. Now let's get the cake out of the fridge. I'm sticking 2 toothpicks on either side of the skewer. That way when I stick it on the top, it's not going to twist. So getting a little bit of icing down where it's going to touch the cake, stick the topper on, and then where that extra icing is seeping out, I'm just taking my palette knife, or you could use a paintbrush and just wipe the excess away. Same thing, I'm going to get a little bit of icing. You can use piping gel as well. And of course, I'm out of frame like a moron. But I stuck that on there, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm just removing any excess icing with that palette knife so you can't see it. Now, I don't know, where should I put this? Should I put the horseshoe there? Should I put the flower there? I had to call my mom in and ask her what she thought looked the best. So again, I'm going to get some icing in on the back of that horseshoe, wherever it's going to touch the cake, and then remove the excess icing. You may say, why aren't you using piping gel? It's clear. I feel like icing sticks a little better. I don't know. You could use piping gel if you want. But a little bit of icing on the back of that flower and just adjusting the petals, and there is the cake.
So there you go. And I know I always say, so there you go, but there you go. There is how to decorate this adorable cowgirl themed cake. And I just want to make a note, I forgot to say in the video, I know an airbrush machine can be a bit of an investment. However, once you get it, you're going to use it all the time. I love my airbrush machine. It just brings out, it just takes your cake to another level. It just makes them look a lot better. If you can't invest in an airbrush machine, you can use petal dust. Just make sure you use edible petal dust, and I will find some and link them below, but I would use like a brown, and the color transfers. So you have to use a little bit of dust, goes a long way with that, and then you could just take a paintbrush and paint that on the rope as well. So this cake is 4-inch, 6-inch, and the bottom tier is a 1-layer 8-inch cake. And I have a video talking about how I make different heights of my tiers to get different servings, and I will link that in the description. She originally asked for a cake 2 tiers to feed 30, but I just thought it would look better if it was 3 tiers, and this is just one of those examples again where I just go a little above and beyond. I put on an extra tier. It's a little selfish on my part because I'm like, I need more space, so I make another tier. But anyway, I didn't charge extra for her for the extra tier. And this cake does feed 30 people. And how much did I charge? $475. And Addison's mom is so sweet. She tipped me an extra $65 for this cake. So in total, I got $540. So that's it for now. What did you learn from this video? What are some new techniques that you picked up on? I would love to know. You can put that in the comments below. And you can keep in touch on socials and check out my website. Why do I keep doing this? It's listed in the description below as well. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next. Am I pointing at it? I don't know. And hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Please like this video if you liked it. Thank you so much for watching. Whoa! I appreciate you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.